You are listening to the second part of the story. You can listen to the first part in the previous video or by following the link in the description under this video. Happy listening. 2 weeks passed. I didn't hear anything. Nothing. I did not eat. I did not sleep. I drank too much. My boss called my parents because she thought I might commit suicide. Mom asked what happened. I couldn't tell her. She asked if I wanted her to talk to Lynn. I begged her not to do this. I still had hope. I still thought that she might come back to me. I waited 14 days of hell, staring at the phone, howling like a drug addict because I couldn't call. I waited for the suffering to pass. I waited for my heart to finally begin to heal. I waited in vain. Every day was worse than the previous one. Every day, the blackness at the center of my soul spreads inside me like hot tar. I was drowning in tears. It was Saturday, a gorgeous October morning. The sky was electric blue. Not a cloud in sight for 5 counties. A light breeze rustled the branches that had lost their leaves a week earlier. The newspaper was lying on the driveway. I went out into the street in a robe and bare feet, not paying attention to the cold, 3-day stubble on my cheeks, hair matted from sweat. A soft voice came from the street, near my mailbox. "Hello?" My head jerked up and I dropped the newspaper. Lynn walked over slowly and picked up the plastic-wrapped newspaper at my feet. Her car was parked in front of my house, where a piney tree hid her from prying eyes. She looked at me, and her dark eyes, catching the faint sunlight, sparkled. She smiled and touched my stubbled jaw with her fingers. "Wow," she raised her hand. "See, you were right." This stigma faded over time. She was trying to joke, and I tried to smile politely. Hey, she said, wiping away the tears that stained my cheeks. She hugged me and held me tightly. My own hands hung at my side. I had no strength to do anything but cry. I had been so devastated by the last 2 weeks that my only reaction to any emotion, despair, rage, joy, was tears. Lynn led me inside. "Come on, let's go to the shower." This was exactly what I needed. I lathered up and scrubbed myself up. And when I came out, Lynn was standing there with my razor and shaving gel. She didn't even notice that I was standing naked in front of her. I sat on the toilet seat while she lubricated my face and shaved me thoroughly. It was the kindest thing anyone has ever done for me. What should I tell her? "How's Amy?" I asked. She smiled. "She is all right. Worried about you." "Why were you worried?" "Because I called your mom and she said you weren't okay." I let out a humorless laugh. "No, I can't cope for the last 2 weeks." She stroked my face with a towel. "I can't cope either." She helped me to my feet and we went into the bedroom. While I was in the shower, she made the bed and filled 2 laundry baskets with dirty clothes. "I missed you, Michael. You didn't call. All you had to do was pick up the phone." She shook her head. "It wasn't that easy." She sat down on the bed, and I did the same. I had a feeling that something important was about to happen, and I did not know whether this would be my salvation or my end. Her voice took on a distant note, as if she was remembering something that happened many, many years ago. "I was so angry with you. I was just so angry." Then she looked at me and returned to the present. "But I love you. I love you and want to be with you." She took my hands in hers. "Can you forgive me and forget that that evening even happened?" This was her way of admitting the truth. And admit that I know what this truth means. She couldn't ask me to pretend I was dating one sister when I was dating both, because then I wouldn't be pretending, would I? Would I agree to live a lie based on mutual love and trust? Could I forget that she and her sister had been carefully deceiving me for the last 4 months? No, I couldn't forget, but I can forgive you everything, anything, but I can't relive the last 2 weeks, not knowing if I'll see you again. I looked at my bare feet. What happened that evening should never happen again. Never. This was my ultimatum, one or the other. They had to decide. Lynn sat for a long time, looking at her hands, then turned to me and smiled. "This will never happen again. I promise." There was something sad in her eyes, something that made my heart feel heavy in my chest. I should have been happy that this nightmare was over, but I wasn't. They both loved me. I loved them both. But it had to end. That's what I told myself. This had to end. We kissed, first tenderly, then with great fervor. I suddenly realized that I was naked. She stood up and undressed. I've never seen her naked. She was so beautiful that it took my breath away, a beautiful, melancholic goddess. "Make love to me," she said. She crawled onto the bed and lay down next to me, her thick brown hair spilling over the pillow. I touched her stomach. Her skin was as creamy white as her face. "Are you sure?" "Yes, please." I felt like a fool. "I have no protection." "Michael, please." It was the most beautiful sight imaginable. This angel lying on my bed, waiting for me to love her. We made slow love. We were sweaty, out of breath, arms and legs tangled together. I rolled off her and lay looking at the ceiling. "I think we'll do it again," I joked and immediately regretted it. The girl lying next to me may never be in my bed again. The other twin could have been the one who became Lynn. I wrapped my arms around her. "I love you. I love you too." I kissed her on the cheek. I whispered in her ear again and again, "I love you. I love you. I love you." So I sang her a lullaby. She fell asleep, and I lay awake for a long time. I was wondering how they would decide. They chose roles for the rest of their lives. I doubted that it would be difficult for them to change jobs. They would simply change classes and colleagues. Nobody will ever know. As far as I knew, they were constantly changing back and forth. Maybe they'll flip the coin again. They would lay out a deck of cards. Maybe the girl I met at the grocery store will win because we met first. I didn't know. But for some reason, I wanted it. I couldn't sleep. My soul was too restless. The next day was Sunday. I gave up my 7 a.m. nap and made Lynn bacon and eggs for breakfast. She left just after 9, saying she needed to take care of some things at home. I knew what things she was talking about. As she left, she stopped in the doorway, turned, and kissed me tenderly on the lips. "Goodbye, Michael," she said, and there was a sense of finality in those words. It was a difficult moment. This nonsense had to stop, but someone could have gotten hurt, someone I cared about very much. The rest of the morning I occupied myself with completing 2 weeks' worth of household chores. Wash, vacuumed, cleaned the toilet. I've been waiting for Lynn's call all day. When the phone finally rang around 2, the tension was so great that I had to swallow to keep my lunch from returning to its place. "Hello," she said. "Hello? I love you." I replied that I love her too. She asked if I could come later, around 5, and I said yes, of course. She was getting her hair done and wouldn't be home until then. She didn't mention what we discussed, and I didn't bring it up. I pulled up to her driveway a little after 5. Lynn met me at the door with a kiss and a hungry look in her eyes. "I hope you had a good rest." "Now at home?" She nodded. "We went to the salon together, but she needs to run a few errands. She will be gone for several hours." "That should be enough time," I said. I placed my hands on her waist and pulled her pelvis towards mine. Oh my God. I heard soft footsteps behind me. A familiar voice said, "Okay, I'll be home in a few hours. It won't be easy." I put a smile on my face and slowly turned to face her. When she appeared in my field of vision, I received one of the biggest shocks of my life. They still had the same shoulder-length hairstyle, but instead of Lynn's shiny copper locks, Amy was now a sunny strawberry blonde. It stunned me. "Amy, wow." She smiled. Perhaps she thought she was hiding it, but I saw sadness in her eyes. "Is everything that bad?" she asked. "Everything is so good, you look fantastic." It was true. She looked incredible. And most importantly, she looked different. Now anyone could tell them apart. It was her sign of surrender to prove that she and her sister had given up on the game. She thanked me for the compliment. And then, without saying another word, she left. I said, "It takes a certain amount of courage for her to decide to change the color of her hair." "This is a big change," Lynn shrugged. Girls do this all the time. She reached down and undid the button on my jeans. Pulling my zipper down, she said, "There's something else people do all the time." This time, we weren't slow and loving. This time, we were at it, hot and hard, both screaming and scratching each other. And I knew that this was the same girl I had made love to that morning. There was no hesitation like the day before. I wonder if Lynn and Amy would go back to their unspoken agreement to stop sharing me. Would Lynn, living with me every day, get tired and leave me? I can't answer this question because I messed things up long before these problems started. I was happy. So happy that it seemed unfair. My face hurt from smiling all day. Lynn was happy too, but her joy was tinged with sadness. It was Amy. She was clearly depressed. We all knew why Amy was sad, but no one could say why. It was taboo. Amy didn't spend her days crying and her nights drinking like I did, but she was unhappy, and it hurt me to see her in this state. It was more than caring for a friend. After all, this was the girl I held in my arms, kissed and whispered in her ear how much I loved her. These lips, constantly frowning, once gave me unimaginable pleasure. She gave me such joy, and it was my fault that she was now unhappy. Perhaps it was not only my fault, there were many to blame, but this does not make it any easier for me. What bothered me even more was my growing attraction to her. Now she was completely different, beautiful in her own way, but still very similar to the girl I was in love with. The changes in her appearance only made the situation even more confusing. But I loved Lynn more than ever. The thought of me leaving Lynn for Amy was laughable. I was already looking for engagement rings and starting to think about a suitable wedding date. We hadn't talked about marriage yet, but it seemed so surprisingly inevitable. In November, the teacher Lynn worked with got married, and we were invited to the wedding. But I couldn't go. I had a project at work, and I had to work that Saturday. I tried my best to wiggle my way out so that Lynn and I could get away for the weekend and maybe talk a little about our own wedding hopes and dreams, but to no avail. On the Thursday before she left, we made love at my house until 2 in the morning, and then, exhausted, I lay back on the pillow until the spots disappeared from my eyes. "You can do me a favor," she whispered. "Oh my God, anything. Could you come to Amy on Saturday? Maybe invite her to dinner just to keep her company. She's a little depressed." This sounded like a really bad idea to me, so I said so. "Why?" she asked. And this puzzled me. If the twins stopped the division of labor, why should I object? A taboo has arisen again. Any problem in this situation will be on my conscience from now on. Did I have a problem? I said, "Well, I should finish around 6. I can come over to your place after work. Maybe we could share a pizza or something, rent a movie." That's what we did. I knocked on the door a little before 7, nervous as a cat. As far as I knew, this was the girl I met at the grocery store. When she opened the door, her gorgeous strawberry hair framed that beautiful face, and I wanted to run and hide. We ate pizza, watched a movie, and it was all very pleasant, right and strange. The tension in the room was so palpable that I could feel it, the sour electric taste of hot metal in my mouth. She looked at me as if she wanted to say something, and didn't. She just smiled. And whatever it was that was making my heart pound, she stepped on the gas. She was lying on the sofa. I was sitting in a chair. She was wearing the typical uniform of a girl coming home for a quiet evening with her boyfriend, sweatpants and a t-shirt. I drank a beer, then another, but the alcohol could not extinguish the fire inside me. I saw her in profile. She was so beautiful that I could not stand it. I loved her strawberry blonde hair. I loved watching her smile. I used to love her. I loved Amy. I couldn't pretend anymore that I wasn't. I used to love her. I loved Lynn. I loved each of them with all my heart. When the movie ended, I wanted to leave and let time and distance clear my head, but she asked me to help her put away the dirty dishes, and I agreed. I wanted to say so much more, but I couldn't because I didn't know what to say. Here is my excuse for what happened. My emotions were seething inside me. My inhibitions were suppressed by alcohol. In fact, this is not an excuse at all. If I had been drinking ginger ale all night, it wouldn't have made a difference. Amy opened the pantry cabinet to put away the garlic salt shaker and couldn't reach the top shelf. She stood up on her tiptoes, and when she reached up, her t-shirt also rose up, revealing a glorious inch of smooth white skin around her stomach. I said, "Here, I'll help." He stepped behind her and took the plastic bottle from her hands. I leaned forward to put the shaker on the shelf, and as I leaned over, my chest touched her back. My face touched her fragrant hair. I dropped the shaker with a soft thud, my nervous fingers dropping it instead of placing it on the shelf. My hands fell on her chest. I wrapped my hands around them and pulled her towards me. I pressed my lips to her neck and kissed her, closing my eyes, hoping that if I couldn't see what I was doing, maybe it would just stop. Amy gasped and squirmed in my arms, but I held her tightly and kissed one side of her neck, then the other. A small cry escaped her lips. She turned around abruptly, grabbed my face, and pressed her lips to mine, and we kissed with such force that her teeth cut my lip. I pulled off her sweatpants and we had sex. It was wild sex. I don't know how long this went on. When we finished, Amy looked at me over her shoulder. I betrayed the woman I loved, and with her sister at that. Another memory I will savor on my deathbed. The very moment when I crushed my hopes for happiness. Amy whispered, "I'm not a virgin anymore," and the surprise and amazement in her voice almost broke me. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," I whispered. "Shh. I can't believe I did this." "It's okay," she reassured. "I like it." I was already sobbing, and Amy took my hands and put my head on her shoulder. I had just taken her virginity, against her will, and she was the one consoling me. She held me until I pulled myself together. "I took you by force." "No, that's not true. If you hadn't touched me first, I would have done it." She kissed the top of my head. "You would never do anything so terrible." "I betrayed Lynn. I love her more than anything in the world, and this is how I treat her." I looked at her serene face. "And you?" She stroked my cheek. "She'll never know. I have to tell her. I can't lie to her like that." "You can't tell her. What will it give?" She took my face in her hands and looked at me intently. "Even if she finds out, Lynn will forgive you." "I know he will forgive. She loves you." It sounded impossible. Then I said, "How can you forgive me?" She kissed me on the lips, a gentle, chaste kiss. "I have already forgiven you." She told me to go home. I went. I hated leaving her, but staying was even worse. I fell asleep around 4 in the morning, completely exhausted. I woke up from the phone ringing. It was noon. "Hi, honey," Lynn said. All I could say was, "Hello," in reply. Luckily, she didn't make me talk much. She said the wedding was great. She had a great time, but she had a few errands to run, and would it be okay if I showed up at, say, 5? I said it's okay. I said I love her. She said she loves me. We hung up. I went back to bed. Would Amy tell her? And I? It's not that I don't know how to keep secrets from my girlfriend, but I didn't know how I could keep this secret, how I could keep myself from Amy, from making love to her again. I used to love her. I loved Lynn. I hated myself. I hated the whole world. At 5 o'clock, I arrived at their house, speechless with excitement. My nervous system, overstressed over the past 24 hours, was no longer providing perfect communication between my brain and body. My right eye was twitching. The fingers of my left hand were numb. I rang the bell. I tried to force a smile, but the corners of my mouth refused to curl. Yes, Lynn won't notice that anything is wrong. Certainly. Door opened. Both twins stood in the doorway. They stood with identical smiles on their sweet faces. They were both wearing white t-shirts, blue jeans, and white sneakers, and they both had strawberry blonde hair. I stood there staring at them for about 10 seconds. They looked exactly the same again. Exactly. The three of us came to one of those moments where we couldn't talk about what was happening. They just smiled and waited to see what I would do. I could have left. I could drag one of them into the house and cut off her hair with kitchen scissors. But I didn't. If I had a white flag, I would wave it. I said, "Wow, you look great." I looked at the space between their heads as I said this. "Thank you," they said in unison. The three of us had a very good dinner, lasagna, garlic bread, and salad. In all this time, I have not addressed any of them by name. I sat on one side of the table, they sat on the other. When we finished, they told me to sit in the living room and relax while they washed the dishes. While I was sitting like a corpse in their chair, one of the twins came in and kissed me. "I love you," she said, and then slipped back into the kitchen. "Lynn," I suggested. And then, a minute later, the other twin came out, kissed me the same way, said the same thing, and left. They tested me all evening, and I passed the exam with flying colors. I didn't even try to figure out who was who. I just smiled and allowed myself to be kissed and touched, and when it was time to leave, I gave each girl a neutral wave and walked to my car. I was a beaten man. I had two options: give up on them both or love them both and see what the hell happened. It was like I had a choice. Let the bones fly. My girlfriend's name was Lynn, her sister's name was Amy. This hasn't changed. As the weeks went by, it almost became the norm. I loved them. They loved me. We were all happy. What was wrong with that? Several months passed, and my friends kept asking, "So when are you two getting married?" Good question. I started looking for engagement rings. I asked Amy what kind of ring Lynn would like. Gold, silver, platinum, princess cut stone, round, pear-shaped. "It's a princess cut stone, set in white gold," she said. "Are you sure?" Her eyes sparkled. "Sure." And she was sure, wasn't she? A month later, I had the ring. Choosing the right moment to ask a girl to become your wife is always difficult. It was a nightmare for me. I didn't know how they would react to the engagement. I prayed that once the lucky lady put the ring on her finger, she would not refuse it. That the ring would be enough to break the spell and end this madness forever. The problem was figuring out which girl to give it to and when. I still believed that one of the twins was the real Lynn, and that she was the one I wanted to marry. But there was no way to know which girl it was. I finally said to hell with it and asked her over dinner at a restaurant in Mount Washington how everyone gets engaged in Pittsburgh. Our table was right by the window, the glittering towers of the Golden Triangle reflected in the smooth Monongahela River. I got down on one knee, asked a question, got an answer, got a kiss, and got a few rounds of applause from our fellow table mates. Everything went flawlessly. "We have to tell Amy," she said, looking at the stone on her finger. "Of course, we'll stop by tomorrow morning so she can—" "We should stop by this evening. I thought we would return to my place. I have a bottle of champagne." After we stopped by Amy's, the waiter came over and Lynn asked if she could take the check. No dessert or coffee. I drove us back to their house with Lynn's head resting on my shoulder. Everything would be so wonderful if not for one small flaw that changed everything. I drove the car with a blank slate in my head. It's a miracle I didn't drive off the Smithfield Street Bridge. Lynn showed Amy the ring. They were both in tears. I gave Amy a brotherly hug, then I hugged Lynn and held her close. And it seemed that everything was fine. We try in our lives to bring a little happiness to others. I somehow made these two women happy. Maybe it would have been better if each of them had met their boyfriend, but that wasn't what they wanted. I couldn't understand why, but if that's what they wanted, who am I to say it's wrong? Lynn took off the ring and gave it to Amy to try on. "It fits," she giggled, admiring the fiery stone in the lamplight. Amy handed the ring back and winked at me. "Don't worry, I didn't mean to keep it." "It's better not. I can't afford two of these." "Oh, if you had to, you could handle it." They both laughed. I managed to smile. I'm a history buff, and I've read dozens of books about World War II. It has always amazed me how the German people managed to ignore the Holocaust that was raging around them. One day you greet your neighbors, and the next day, the Gestapo arrests them and takes them to a camp. And you don't say anything. You act as if your neighbors disappearing every day is completely normal. I thought it was unconscionable that no one could behave like that and call themselves a decent person. I believed this until Lynn and I got engaged. And then I realized how easy it is to pretend that the terrible reality around you does not exist. I, of course, do not equate my ridiculous situation with the tragedy of the Holocaust. I do not want to justify Germany for what happened at that terrible time. But now I understand what cowardice a person experiences when faced with a terrible truth, how he is soothed by the feeling of inertia when taking measures to correct the situation means certain death. I don't feel so smug and confident anymore. We set a wedding date, June 17th. I no longer tried to guess whether they would switch places. I threw the notebook in the trash. My fiancée's name was Lynn. Her sister's name was Amy. Over the course of several months, the girls decided to return their hair to a natural dark blonde, and I was never able to detect any difference in shades when the dyed strands were replaced by hair of its natural color. Not that I spent much time trying. I've trained my mind to ignore everything else. Now I was worried about invitations, hotel bookings, and disc jockeys. This was enough to worry. Finally, the great day arrived. A clear, cool June afternoon. Of course, it was a small wedding since Lynn and Amy had no family other than each other. Lynn invited her students to the ceremony. My family and our friends were there, so the church was full of life. I wouldn't care if the pews were empty. I had eyes only for Lynn, eyes that filled with tears as soon as she entered the church. She walked down the aisle alone, holding a bouquet of white roses, her wedding dress simple and absolutely stunning. Amy was the only bridesmaid, and Rick was my best man. When I took Lynn's hand and we turned to face the priest, I was shaking so hard that I could hear the people behind me murmuring. "Breathe, Mike," Father Phil said, and everyone burst into laughter. Somehow I made it through the ceremony. I said my vows in a clear, strong voice. We exchanged rings, and then it was time to kiss my wife. During the entire ceremony, we did not say a word to each other, but when I looked into her eyes, I felt an almost transcendental euphoria, as if I had grown wings and flew to heaven. Maybe this is what the first few seconds after a fatal stroke feel like, when your dying brain gives you one last push of life before the book closes forever. "Hello, my wife," I said. "Hello, my husband." We kissed. A long, dramatic kiss, with a little dive at the end. We walked out to applause and flashing lights. Finally, we got married. The reception was exactly what I had hoped. A great party. The food was great, the drinks were flowing, and everyone was dancing. I was too busy to pay close attention, but Amy seemed to be having fun too. I was worried about her, as I would have been worried about any unmarried girl whose sister was a princess for a day. But Amy looked great. In fact, she spent most of her time on the dance floor with my great-uncle Fred, who was 86 years old and still giving it his all. Amy looked absolutely stunning in a pale green dress, which, with her blonde hair styled in an updo, gave her a glamorous and dramatic look. "Maybe you picked the wrong one," Rick said, standing at my elbow. "No. You are the luckiest of men. You married well and have great friends. Well, one great friend anyway." He patted me on the back. I wanted so badly to tell my best friend that luck is a double-edged sword, but of course I couldn't. It was already too late for the confession to do any good. "Find yourself a good girl. Fall in love. Marry her," I said. He said, "Well, now that you mention it, your cousin Kelly is quite a pretty girl. I don't think that such a girl can have common DNA with you, but accidents happen. If you allow me, I'm going to dazzle her with my wit and charm." And he left. "Will you ask me to dance?" A favorite voice came from behind me. I turned to embrace my bride in my arms. But it was not my bride. It was her sister. I swallowed, took a deep breath, and extended my hand. "Let's dance." Of course, the slow song started right away, and I gave Amy a brotherly hug and walked her in a clockwise circle, both of us walking on eggshells. "Was today everything you wanted?" she asked. "Even better." We turned once in silence. Then she said, "I know how happy you made her. That's all I ask from you, that you make her happy. I will do it, I promise." She looked up at me, and tears began to flow in those huge blue eyes. Hey, I said, afraid to say anything else. She shook her head. "I'm fine." We made a half turn when she said, "I just feel like I'm losing her, losing the only family I have." No, it's not like that," I reassured her. "You are now as much a part of my family as Lynn is." I winced a little when I said this, but she didn't react at all, so I continued. I can't imagine that you won't be a part of our lives. You mean too much to Lynn. And I cut to the chase, putting all my chips in. You mean too much to me. The song is over. The damn chicken dance has begun. Amy pulled away from my embrace, her eyes dry. She kissed me on the cheek. Go look for your wife. She left me with a smile on her lips. I spent the rest of the night glued to Lynn. When we finally escaped to our room, I was physically exhausted and my emotions had dried up. We made love quietly. I closed my eyes and imagined Amy in her pale green dress, imagined it was Amy lying underneath me, and that was all it took. It was good, I whispered. The perfect end to a perfect day. We kissed for another minute or so, and then Lynn got up to wash her face before going to bed. I fell asleep before she returned. Our alarm was set for 6 a.m. to give us enough time to get to the airport before our 9 a.m. flight to Puerto Rico. When I woke up, it was a little after 4. I woke up to a noise in the room loud enough to wake me up. It was a sharp metallic click. I muttered, getting up. Lynn's voice came from the foot of the bed. Shh, it's just me. She walked around the bed and climbed under the covers. I needed a glass of water. She lay down and pressed the spoon against my back. I let my head rest against the pillow. Our room was on the top floor of the hotel. I listened and heard a tiny ding from the corridor. Elevator. Who can be up at 4 in the morning? It was Amy. It was the click I heard as the door closed as they switched places. The woman I married before God and family went down one flight of stairs and slept alone the rest of the night, while her sister shared our marital bed. One twin got his wedding day, the other got his honeymoon. My head felt heavy, so I put a pillow on it. 10 seconds later, I was already snoring, sleeping in the sleep of the innocent. When I got home last night, Amy's car was in the driveway. I parked and walked inside. They were sitting next to each other on the couch, sipping tea. I said hello, and they both looked up at the same time and said, hello. I didn't know if my wife was the girl on the left or the right, and neither of them asked me the usual feminine questions like, how was your day? They sat quietly and serenely, with blissful smiles on their beautiful faces, and both barely noticed my presence. It was a little awkward. I felt like I was in some kind of trouble. I said, I'll go upstairs and change. Okay, they said in unison. Make yourself comfortable. I went up to our bedroom, changed my clothes, and stood in the closet over the toilet, emptying my nervous bladder. What's happened? They didn't seem furious, per se, just tense. Something happened while I was away. But what? I threw the napkin into the wastebasket, and only then did I see the box. It was written on it, Home Pregnancy Test. I stared at it for a long time, 10 seconds or so, and when I finally snapped out of my trance, I grabbed the box. I pulled out the box, and there was a plastic tube with a test strip. There was a plus sign on it. Plus meant pregnancy. I began to tremble all over. Lynn was pregnant. We will have a child. I was going to be a father. That's why they're all so weird. Lynn wanted to tell me some big news and was waiting for the right moment. I was so happy that I did a little dance in the bathroom and knocked over the trash can. Several napkins, a used toilet paper roll, and another box fell out. On the box, it said, Home Pregnancy Test. I knelt down and found another white plastic tube. The test tube was also marked with a plus sign. I relaxed until I sat down on the cool tiles. There was a completely reasonable explanation for this. Lynn thought she was pregnant. She took a test and it came back positive. And to double-check, she made another one. Sure. I got dressed and went downstairs, holding tightly to the railing. They were still sitting there drinking tea. They say that a pregnant woman gives off a certain radiance, that she radiates life blossoming within her. I had to raise my hand to shield my eyes from the golden aura that illuminated the two beautiful women sitting on my couch. I think I'll go out for a while, I said. I thought they might ask me, but they didn't. They let me go. I drove to the nearest bar, parked, and handed the bartender my keys, driver's license, and 3 $20 bills. I pointed. Whiskey here, beer here. When you decide I've had enough, call me a taxi and give the driver the address on my license. Pay him with what's left, I live nearby. He looked at me like I was crazy. Fine. He placed a shot of wild turkey to my left and an ice-cold bottle of Bud to my right. I downed my glass, caught my breath, and swallowed 2 calming sips of beer. I take it you're not a whiskey drinker, said the bartender. Nope. I suffocated. More. He poured it. Any problems? This one was a little easier. I took a sip of beer to dull the burning sensation. Women's problems. He grinned. Women. I heard they can be difficult sometimes. I pointed to the glass and he frowned. Are you sure? I shook my head, but I said, yes. After a glass, I drank the rest of the beer. My wife is pregnant. She hasn't told me yet, but I found out about it in another way. I guess I'm just a little surprised. The bartender relaxed, probably glad that I wasn't cheating with the wife of some guy who might burst in with a gun. Well, congratulations. He poured it. Have a drink at the house's expense. I thought the alcohol would slow down the thoughts racing through my brain, but all the whiskey did was act like a giant eraser at the edges of my mind, erasing the rest of the world. I imagined what people would say when they found out. What will Lynn and Amy look like pregnant? Will even the bloating of their bellies be the same? Would they have been born on the same day? Would they have boys or girls? Oh my God, are they both going to have twins? What if they had twins and all 4 children were the same? Would I have to raise my children and not be able to tell them apart? Will my identical children really have identical grandchildren? I had a terrible vision of my house filled with women who looked the same, Lynn and Amy repeated over and over again, different ages but all the same. I raised my hand to get the bartender's attention and a soft hand took my wrist and lowered it back onto the bar. I turned around. She was smiling at me. I think you know, she said. Eh? I looked into the most beautiful face on earth. How did you find me? We thought you might come here, said a voice behind me. You know, don't you? My head turned and the same face was in front of me, smiling. I nodded. I found the boxes in the trash. Oh, so are you happy? The room was spinning. I couldn't figure out who asked the question. Yes, no. This is a big change. Their voices, their faces merged into one. Yes. There was a long pause. They sat on either side of me. They both leaned towards me. We love you. I thought I would feel bad. But it quickly passed. I love you too. I could say, I love both of you. But I was too far away to catch the Freudian blunder. Go home. The bartender saw that I was not alone and came over to take a look. Okay, stop. He could see up close that I was surrounded by 2 gorgeous women. Wow, double vision. The twins laughed. Which one of you is the lucky one? The girl to my left replied, It's me. For some reason I thought Amy was on my left. But it was the girl to my right who said, I'm her sister. Bartender said, You are a happy, happy person. You can't even imagine. The bartender handed over my license and keys, and Lynn paid my bill and left me a big tip. I was an outpatient. I could walk normally, but they each put their hands on mine and led me to the door. They held me tightly, as if they were afraid that I would break free and run away, but the whiskey had already taken over me, and I could barely raise my head. Lynn drove me home, and Amy followed in my car. They took me upstairs and made me drink 2 large glasses of ice water and 4 aspirin to ward off a hangover. Then they put me to bed until I passed out. When I woke up, I had cotton wool, but my head didn't hurt. I focused my gaze on the ceiling fan. Then I looked down. 2 slender arms crossed on my chest. One girl is on my left, the other is on my right. I'm in the middle. We were naked under the covers. I'll be honest, it was the most wonderful way to wake up that I could ever imagine. I lie in bed, repeating the same prayer in my head. God, give me strength. I close my eyes and want to shut myself out from the world forever. But now it's too late. I had to run away at the first opportunity. Love made me a coward. And now there's nowhere to run. The girl to my right winces, then lays her head on my shoulder. The girl to my left sighs. Shh, I whisper. Sleep. We will tell our secrets soon. Sleep. Sleep.